Chapter 3.2. Second period began, the topic of the OEA app still lingering in the back of our minds. We were probably about to get to the other topic at hand. Receiving a full explanation about that other thing. Or so the students were thinking, and that prediction was quickly proved correct. And now, I'll provide an overview of the next special exam, said Chabashira, immediately launching into the topic as if she were starting a normal lesson. This is your first special exam as second-year students, and it's going to involve some unprecedented new ventures, the likes of which have never been seen before. Such as the introduction of this app. Was that Sakishiro's influence? Or was it Nagumo's? At any rate, it seemed the school system was also undergoing some major changes. The crucial thing for you to know is that this will be a written test in which you second-year students will be partnered up with the new arrivals, the first-year students, said Chabashira. Partnered up with the first-year students? Up until this point, we'd hardly done anything that cut across the boundaries between grade levels. There were some exceptions, like the school camp, but that had still been part of the normal framework of inter-class competition. Had those walls been taken down with the introduction of OEA, then? In this special exam, you'll be mainly assessed on your written test-taking skills and your communication skills, said Chabashira. Our academic and communication skills. At first glance, the two things didn't seem to go together. The importance of this written text really needs no further explanation. But until now, the school has never had such in-depth interactions between students of different grade levels, except for things like the sports festival and the school camp. Which is precisely why the school has determined that its students' communication skills were not as well developed as they could be, said Chabashira. But we're still competing against other classes in our grade, right? I dunno, it's just like, something about this feels off, said Ike, who looked a little unhappy about the fact that the first-year students were going to be heavily involved. I understand how you feel, but try thinking about it objectively. When you first go out into the world and join society at large, the people you encounter won't just be new, fresh-faced graduates like you. Some might be in their second year in the workforce. You'll even be competing with veterans who've been out in the world for 20 or 30 years. People much older or younger than you could come to be your rivals, said Chabashira. Well, yeah, I guess I can picture that. While other parts of the world are embracing meritocracy, many Japanese companies continue to be bound by systems of seniority and permanent lifetime employment. If you think it feels strange to interact with students older or younger than you, you should really change your perspective. To put it in terms that might be easier for you to understand, there's a concept called skipping grades that's a widespread practice in places like the United States, England, and Germany. It's not unusual for small children to study together with high school or even college students. Can you imagine and accept the idea of elementary school students here in this classroom learning with you in the same fashion? My classmates let their imaginations run wild, just as Chabashira had prompted them to do. And I was sure they still couldn't understand it. It must have felt impossible or strange to them, and it was certainly true that skipping grades was rarely done in Japan. In fact, while there were certain conditions that had to be met in order for someone to skip grades, I was sure many people didn't even know that it was possible to do so. The idea of skipping grades didn't really fit with the current status quo in Japan, where learning was treated as something that you did in an equal or egalitarian manner, along a set, linear path. And so, the system wasn't entirely accepted here. Personally, I had no resistance to the idea. There was no such linear learning style in the White Room. However, I was also certain what Chabashira was saying right now wasn't everything. Imitating what other countries were doing wasn't sufficient. Japan needed to have an educational system that fit Japan's social climate. Chabashira probably knew this, too, but I was guessing she had no choice but to explain things to us in accordance with the orders she had received from higher up. There will probably be cases in the future where you'll be competing against first-year and third-year students. But this time you'll be cooperating with one another. Please keep that in mind, said Chabashira. Was that why we were having this special exam that required both written test-taking skills and communication skills? Some students were cocking their heads to the side in apparent confusion, perhaps because they were unable to imagine what the rules would be like. The best way to understand how this will work is for you to think back to one of your special exams from last year. It's probably easier for you to wrap your heads around this test if you think of it as an improved, modified version of the paper shuffle exam, where you had to find a partner from among your classmates, said Chabashira. The paper shuffle had been a special exam where we had to form pairs with a classmate and then handle taking a test together. Essentially, we wouldn't be partnering with someone from our own class this time, but rather with first-year students, from the sounds of it. Even though that seemed like the only difference, it was a huge one. You are free to decide which of the first years you want to partner up with from any class. The partner selection period is about 2 weeks, starting today and lasting until the end of the month. You'll have time both to carefully select your partners and devote yourselves to your studies, said Chabashira. With how this special exam worked, it was no wonder we were being made to install the OEA app at this stage. The first-year students obviously wouldn't be familiar with the names and faces of their seniors, and the second-year students wouldn't be familiar with the names and faces of first years. In the paper shuffle, where we'd picked partners from among our classmates, we were able to do so freely, with nuance and coordination, precisely because we were choosing from among people we knew well. This made it easy for a student who was poor at academics to make it through with someone else's support. This exam, however, was different. It operated on the premise that both students would be looking for an excellent partner. Moreover, instead of partnering up with students in our grade level, we'd be partnering with first years, who we had no relationship with. The first years and second years were each working with their own unique set of circumstances too. We each had our own things to deal with. More importantly, it took a considerable amount of time to build a relationship of trust from nothing. If we wanted to build such a relationship without this app, then 2 weeks would most certainly not be enough. With the OEA app, however, we could take some shortcuts by being able to recognize names and faces based on what we saw in the app. Moreover, since we could get a rough sense of everyone's current academic ability, it would be easy for us to use it as reference when looking for partners. On the day of the written test, you will be tested on 5 subjects. Each subject is worth 100 points, for a total of 500 points. And the most important rule is, well, this time, there are 2 areas in which you'll be competing. As a class and as individuals, said Chabashira. She held her finger up to the blackboard, bringing up the display for the results of the special exam. Class rewards for each grade level. The winning class will be determined based on each class's average score, which will be derived from the scores of all members of the class and the scores of all their partners. The class point rewards are 50 points, 30 points, 10 points, and 0 points, in descending order of average score. Individual rewards. Winners are determined based on the combined scores of each pair of partners. The top 5 pairs will receive 100,000 private points each as a special reward. Pairs who score in the top 30th percentile will each receive 10,000 points. In the event that a pair has a total score of 500 points or less, the second-year student will be expelled, and the first-year student will not receive any private points for a period of 3 months, regardless of how many class points their class has. In addition, any student determined to have manipulated their scores, such as by purposefully answering questions incorrectly, will be expelled, regardless of their grade level. Similarly, in the event that a third party is found to have forced another student to lower their score, that third party will be expelled. I'm sure you already have an inkling of this, but in this exam, students with excellent academic ability will be highly sought after, said Chabashira. If we didn't have the OEA app, we wouldn't have been able to see those kinds of details. But with the release of this app, students' abilities were now on full display for everyone to see. The worse a student's academic ability score, the harder it would be for that student to find a partner. It was clear that the students who had concerns about their grades were likely to be left behind. Smart students would, naturally, try to team up with smart partners and aim for the top rewards. Students who struggled with their grades would similarly seek smart partners in order to survive. If 2 poor students, of which there were many, ended up teaming up, they might very well score under the 500-point mark. If that happened, the second-year student would face the harsh reality of expulsion. Second-year students understood how this school worked and had developed more than a few friendships within their classes. They would probably try to help their classmates, even if it meant giving up on the higher-level rewards. The first-year students, however, would naturally struggle to unite their classes for now. As a result, they wouldn't give all that much thought to the fact that a student they didn't know very well, whom they weren't really friends with, would have to go 3 months without getting any private points. It wouldn't seem like all that big a deal to them. It would be just like that time a year ago, when almost everyone in our class was thinking about abandoning Sudo. No, actually, it would be even worse than that. Partnerships are established based on mutual acceptance from both participants, and they are finalized via registration in the OEA app. It will be possible for you to select a partner from this moment onward, but but keep in mind that once your partner has given their consent and the match has been confirmed, you will not be allowed to dissolve the partnership afterward for any reason, explained Chabashira. That made it all the harder to choose quickly, unless the other person's academic ability was especially high. A hasty decision could lead to regret down the line. The monitor refreshed, then displayed information related to partnerships. Methods and rules for determining a partner. Students are allowed to send a partner request per day to the person they wish to partner with using the OA app. If the partner request is not accepted by the other party, your ability to send a fresh request will be reset at 2400 hours. If the other party does accept your partner request, the partnership will be confirmed, and you will not be allowed to cancel the partnership afterward. Asterisk note, the only exception to this rule is certain extenuating circumstances, such as if the other student has been expelled or is seriously ill. Once a partnership has been confirmed, the OA app will be updated at 8 a.m. on the following day, and both students will not be able to accept any new partner requests. Asterisk note, the names of who students have partnered up with will not be shown in the app. With these rules in place, you couldn't just send out a large number of partner requests at random. And even if you did send a request to a specific person, that request might end up going to waste, because that person might already have partnered with someone else that day and you wouldn't know until the app updated at 8 a.m. the following day. I didn't know if a student would really accept a partner request from someone they didn't know too well, though. Most likely, these rules were put in place as a measure to make it impossible to know who had teamed up with who. It would make it too easy to estimate the strength of each class if the details of the partnerships were shown right from the start, I supposed. Sensei. But it's like, there's no way there'll be a single Kohai who'll want to partner up with me, though. Are you seriously saying that a complete moron like me has to somehow make this work with just my communication skills? Wailed Ike. His lamentation was entirely justified. The chances of someone needing a student with poor grades, like him, were quite low until that someone ran out of options for other students they wanted to team up with. That is, if you were doing things the proper way, of course. Don't worry. The school has taken certain things into account to ensure no one gets left behind, no matter how many students fail to find partners. In the event that you are unable to pair with someone before the special exam is held, pairings will be selected randomly at 8 in the morning on the day of the test, explained Chabashira. Ike held a hand up to his chest after hearing what could be interpreted as a measure intended to provide us with relief. But that moment of relief was short-lived. That being said, students who fail to find a partner will not be treated the same as students who did find partners. Therefore, any pair created via the method I just described, the one where you run out of time and have someone chosen at random for you, will be subject to a penalty of 5% of your total score, said Chabashira. The entire class let out wails of agony after hearing about the 5% penalty. While the system they had in place meant you could still take the exam, you'd still suffer a painful setback. Sensei, 3 students have been expelled so far from our grade. Won't that mean there will be 3 extra first-year students? Asked Yusuke. Upon hearing such a trivial question, Chabashira answered him in an indifferent tone. The 3 extra students will be compensated in the form of having their points doubled. However, they will also be subjected to the same 5% penalty for not finding a partner I mentioned previously, so I'm sure not many of them will be happy about the thought of being left alone. So each of those 3 people would be taking the exam alone, filling both roles of their respective pair themselves. I supposed it would be fine if 3 first-year students with excellent academic skills were alone then. However, I couldn't afford to only worry about Ike and Suda during this exam. Because this special exam was most certainly going to be exceptionally difficult for me. The reason it was going to be so difficult was the part where you'd get expelled if your total score was 500 points or below. To put it another way, that meant my partner, who would be quite important to me clearing the special exam, had to get at least 1 point. Even if I got a perfect score in all 5 subjects, if my partner scored a 0, then expulsion would be unavoidable. Under normal circumstances, this would be a dangerous and extremely pointed rule. Since first-year students faced no risk of expulsion themselves, they could purposefully botch the test or get a low score to force their second-year partner to be expelled. But the school had devised another rule to stop that kind of thing from happening. In addition, any student determined to have manipulated their scores, such as by purposefully answering questions incorrectly, will be expelled, regardless of their grade level. Similarly, in the event that a third party has been found to have forced another student to lower their score, that third party will be expelled. You could say that part was both incredibly important and indispensable to this special exam's legitimacy. It was a measure put in place to prevent malicious behavior, like someone trying to extort private points out of another student by threatening to purposefully throw the exam. With this rule in place, you couldn't blatantly cut corners on the test. Also, the average students would be safer. However, while these rules would normally be enough to put my worries to rest, they were not adequate to make this test a sure thing this time. That was because for a student from the White Room, it was a different story. The student from the White Room was operating on the premise that they were going to get expelled eventually anyway. That rule wasn't going to stop them. If that student successfully managed to pair up with me, they probably wouldn't hesitate to purposefully score a 0 on the test. Meaning, if I happen to choose the student from the White Room as my partner, that's it, I'm out. Once the special exam began, there was a 1 in 160 chance or higher that I'll get expelled. Now, if there was a rule that stated something like, in the event a student's partner is expelled due to some form of dishonest behavior, the other student in the partnership will be treated as having gotten a passing grade, without further penalty, that would be good. However, as far as I could tell, no such guarantees were present. The fact that no one had bothered to bring that point up was a result of the self-serving assumption that no student would purposefully go out of their way to do something that would result in their own expulsion. Well, no. It wasn't just that. In the unlikely event that a student did do such a thing, the school would probably take immediate action to deal with it. I was sure they'd probably decree that expelling a student who'd simply been the victim of someone else's cheating would be too harsh. But I was also sure that if I, and only I, were the one in such a situation, that man would enforce the punishment. He'd say it was my fault for pairing up with a student who didn't take the exam seriously. He'd purposefully put a small loophole in the rules to let him react to things as he needed in the moment. The image of Tsukishiro flickered in the back of my mind. These were most definitely rules that he had produced. There was no way he would miss the opportunity presented by this special exam. If I hemmed and hawed and lagged behind the other students in choosing a partner, it would mean people other than the new White Room student would be partnering up, increasing my chances of ending up with the White Room agent. It would be nice if I could act quickly to pair up with a student whom I didn't think was from the White Room, but my academic ability, as rated by OAA, was C. I wasn't exactly in a position to pick and choose partners as I pleased. But even if I tried to pick a first year with a poor score in that department, they probably wouldn't allow me to pair up with them, unable to shake their uneasiness at me being ranked C in terms of academic ability. In that case, I would probably have to find a partner who was also around C rank in academic ability and wouldn't mind pairing up with me. But it was possible that my opponent was already lying in wait, anticipating me doing so, ready to ambush me. As soon as I heard the rules explained, I was certain this test was going to be a bigger challenge than any I'd faced before. "Sensei, about how difficult is this exam going to be?" asked Horikita, raising her hand and posing a critical question. To be perfectly frank, there are going to be many extremely tough questions on this exam. You could say it will, without a doubt, be one of the most difficult exams that you've ever taken. But that's only if you're aiming to get a high score, though. This test is designed in such a way that even a student with an academic ability ranking of around E can get at least 150 points without any prior preparation. If you study for a few days, you'll probably get around 200 points. And, well, this is only a rough approximation, but Chabashira directed our attention to the screen, which displayed a list of estimated scores split up by academic ability ranking. Academic ability E, 150 to 200 points. Academic ability D, 200 to 250 points. Academic ability C, 250 to 300 points. Academic ability B, around 350 points. Academic ability A, around 400 points. If you prepare for this test properly, you should score somewhere around the numbers shown here. But don't forget that if you get overconfident and neglect your studies, you might obviously end up scoring lower, said Chabashira, before quickly adding that we shouldn't get too confident about the numbers we saw displayed on the screen. Also, as I'm sure you can see if you look at the part where a student with A-ranked academic ability gets around 400 points, it's unlikely for a student to get over 90 points in every subject, let alone perfect score on this exam. That was probably a direct reflection of what she'd said earlier about this being the most difficult exam we'd faced so far. In any case, if two students with an academic ability near E rank were paired up, they would most definitely be in danger of being expelled. Well, then, I've finished providing an overview of the special exam to be held in April. Please buckle down and prepare yourself for the challenge, said Chabashira. She went on to verbally explain the scope of the test questions. Apparently, according to her, we should be all right as long as we thoroughly went over the material that we had learned in our first year.